Hi, Bobby Herzberg of the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Today, we've been talking about the implications of mainline economics for helping us understand some of the difficult problems of today in economics, in politics, and in philosophy. I'd like to give you a couple of examples today that we've seen in recent policy action in the United States. The first example is out of the fiscal crisis in 2008 into 2009. In an effort to try and ease the difficulty that people faced as they lost jobs and as some of the financial crisis was occurring and people were losing wealth, pushed us into a variety of political solutions. So we saw short-term redistribution, short-term payments being made, longer-term unemployment benefits being offered to people. And as a result, it changed people's incentives. The logic was to make it easier for folks to get through this difficult crisis. But the real result, it might have been, was to extend this financial crisis even further, as the incentive to go back to work declined relative to the benefits that were being provided in the short run. And given that often once you are working and earning a certain level of wages, you may not qualify for the same level of benefits that were being provided. Often the cliff, what we call a fiscal cliff in terms of the financial decision-making for an individual, it can be as much, according to Casey Mulligan and his analysis on recovery and recessions, of 48% cut by going back to work. And in that circumstance, you're not likely to see people take up the idea of going back to work. And so that's one example where understanding the incentives as the individual sees them is more important than understanding the feel-good politics of wanting to serve people that are challenged and struggling at a given point in time. We know we want to help them, but the way in which we help them may in fact actually make them worse off. And so mainline economics helps us to sort some of that out. I highly recommend Casey Mulligan's study on this and many of the other studies about the financial crisis that you can find at the mercatus.org website. Additionally, let me give you another example. In the area of base closings in the United States, we all want our politicians to make good decisions about efficient use of the financial resources that we provide them. Well, back in the 1980s and into the 90s, we had a lot of debate about which particular economic resources should be available to the military, which bases. Many of these bases in individual congressional districts had been built over long periods of time, and they offered jobs, they offered economic development as little stores and other companies around the base built up. But so people in the districts liked having a military base or a military installation nearby to provide those economic benefits. But were they worthwhile from a military standpoint? Did the military want to keep paying for all of these duplicative bases? And the answer was no. If we wanted to cut military spending, as many Democratic presidents wanted to do, then shouldn't it be done in a more sensible fashion? So in response, they came up with a solution that would deal with the common pool resource that congressmen found themselves in, trying to maintain each of their individual bases for their district, whether they were efficient for the military or not. And so they set up the BRAC, the Base Reconstruction and Closing Commission. And as a result, that commission, which was independent of Congress and the politicians, would decide based on military purpose and economic efficiency which bases were going to be kept open, even made larger perhaps, and which ones would be closed. And by putting it in this commission, instead of the Congress that had traditionally made these decisions, they could take the very large common pool resource and create an institution that would allow all of those individual congressmen to still make the case for their bases, but not to be bound by the excessive spending that would inevitably emerge as each of them asked for more and more spending in their district. And so that was an example that, again, you can read about at mercatus.org that actually worked to change the institution and get base closings taking place and greater efficiency in military spending. So we have two examples here of how, one, a congressional decision with regard to financial spending and an executive decision responding to politics makes the situation worse, and a second where an institutional arrangement allows people to start to change those incentives and change the decision making to reach a better set of outcomes. And so those are a couple of examples that indicate how mainline economic thinking might be used, the kinds of research papers you might think about as you think through these issues. Thank you so much.